everyone, and welcome to this episode of the AWS for Games Boss Level Podcast, where we seek to simplify and demystify how to most effectively use AWS technologies and offerings. My name is Chris Melosinos, and I'm the Principal Evangelist for Video Games here at AWS. And joining me on today's program, we have Senior Solutions Architect, Gina Giese.
Hi.
Solutions Architect, Axel Garcia Rodriguez. Hey, and Principal Solutions Architects Benjamin Meyer and John Bartlett.
Hi, everyone.
All right, whole crew in the house here. And on this episode of Boss Level, we dive into Amazon GameLift Streams, exploring how it enables game developers to distribute their games to larger audiences through an HTML5 browser. We'll cover everything from industry trends driving the need for game streaming, how GameLift Streams works, and share how major game studios are using GameLift Streams to enhance player engagement and create new gaming experiences. But first, as we always do, let's talk about what we've been playing. So, hello crew, thanks for everybody for joining today. This is going to be a fun one, but they're all fun because we make it fun. Let's talk about the games we're playing. Let's start with Gina. Gina, what video games have you been playing?
My answer is probably the same as it's always been. Minecraft is my safe game. I love Minecraft, but also I've been working through Deltarune, which is the sequel to Undertale. So it's really good.
Yes, and doing more research on game history, right? Because at some point we're going to have to do a game history podcast, you and I, right?
I'm working through it.
All right. Very good. Excellent. How about you, Axel?
Yeah, I always say I've been a bit of a competitive gamer, but I've been adding a bunch more to my backlog of like story-based games I need to get to eventually. But my current fix has been getting my competitive fix with Street Fighter 6. I've been super obsessed with playing fighting games these days. Honestly, I compete in local tournaments and everything, so it's been great. It's always been updated, new characters, been a lot of fun.
I was going to also say that unpainted stat just remind me of a chia pet head. Like, are you going to grow like chia hair on top of it?
I'm debating on painting it myself. I've never done it, and I'm not the most crafty in that sense, but I've also been looking at like what kind of color scheme I want out of that one, because I use a couple different colors in game. But yeah, we're like in progress project. That was just a 3D printed for my friend and got it to me for my birthday.
Oh,
so it's been
that's
they know
awesome.
I play Ryu all the time. It's been my guy, so I've been
mains Ryu. Very good. Very cool. We'll have to have probably another conversation about that as well, right? Whether or not you've been to Evo or anything like that.
It's a dream. I want to.
All right.
But not yet.
All right. Well, we'll have to figure out how we can get some Amazon representation out there for you, right? So, yeah. All right. Thank you, Benjamin. How about you?
I'm actually replaying my childhood games. I just got an analog pocket and started playing Pokemon Red. So, and then at the same time, I started playing Hades again on the Switch 2 now. It's a very, very nice game. I really love it. Getting ready for Hades 2, end of the year, I think, if I recall.
Yeah, Hades 2 coming out. An amazing game. And I love those types of crawler games too, dungeon crawler games. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's
very good.
Amazing game.
And you're also joining us from where today?
From Germany, Berlin today.
And so are you out there for Gamescom as well, or no? Just happen to be there?
I'm actually based in Germany. I just recently moved from Munich to Berlin, but ultimately I'm based since ever here. And this year, unfortunately, not at Gamescom, which is currently ongoing.
Well, you know what? You're not at Gamescom, but fortunately you're here with us, and that's the way I think about it. So
exactly.
We'd love to have you here.
And I will just call out the dedication from Benjamin. I think it's like 11 p.m. his time right now. So he's just so excited to be here.
That's right.
Exactly.
Right. Well, we appreciate it. That's how we do this here, right? Global team. Doesn't matter the time, except that John has another meeting right after this. So we're going to stay on time now. John, why don't you tell us what you've been playing, buddy?
Tight schedule. But also when I am not on back-to-back meetings, I've been playing the new Donkey Kong on Switch 2. It is a real fun game. Also, I am someone who loves to 100% things. So it's kind of a problem because being able to smash the entire levels, there's been, some hours spent just sitting and smashing.
And going, that one little piece of geometry right there, I can't get right in there to smash it. And it's going to drive me, I know.
It drives you nuts.
I know, and that's what I've been playing too. A lot of Donkey Kong Bonanza.
It drives you bananas.
It sure does. Oh, okay. I'm just gonna leave. But yes, it does. That was excellent wordplay. But I'm also been kind of mining the sales side of the Switch 2 eShop, which is really great. There's so many games there. So if you just sort them by the cheapest, games on sale, I'm finding games that were pretty amazing that completely passed me by. And one of them is called West of Loathing. I don't know if you've all ever heard of this one, but it is a very light RPG that takes place in a Western type of setting. And it's all like stick figures and line art. And the very first object that you pick up is something called the Walking Stupid book. And when you pick it up and put it in your inventory, it changes the walk cycle of the protagonist into like 10 different types of absurd walk cycles, like slinking across the floor like a snake, or doing cartwheels, or its arms and legs are completely stuck out and it wobbles across the room, and it doesn't do anything other than change your walk cycle animation. So I laughed so hard just watching that play out. And so I'm having a lot of fun playing West of Loathing. So yes, Donkey Kong Bonanza, which is driving us bananas, and West of Loathing. So yeah, the Walking Stupid book. Pretty fantastic. But that's what I've been playing, and that's what we've been playing. And so we're going to go ahead now and jump into the meat of our conversation today, which is about Amazon GameLift streams and how you can use this service to maximize reach for the games that you're creating and kind of putting out there across devices and be able to meet players wherever they happen to be playing. So we're going to talk a little bit first about the history of this and kind of where cloud gaming and streaming is in the games industry right now. So I've had the good fortune to work with many companies over the years that have started to or had brought out game streaming services. Some of them, much like the early web, it's a little too early. Infrastructure wasn't kind of there. Pricing kind of wasn't right. And if we go all the way back and look at platforms like OnLive, back from the earliest generations there, the idea or the solution that game streaming was seeking to solve, and one that we do believe, can be solved as a part of overall game accessibility, is how do we go ahead and get games out to underpowered devices for a particular game without losing any of the gameplay, without losing any of what makes those games great. When we compare video games and video game distribution to other forms of media, video games sit at a distinct disadvantage versus video, versus music, versus audio, because you can take a video, you can go ahead and drop it into 264 bucket, and then it plays on 1 billion devices. But every game that you create, you have to decide which platform you're going to bring it to, and then you have to modify that game to best perform on all those target platforms. So every time you release a game for those multiple devices, you're basically creating new versions. And even if you're using game engines, you still have to go through and kind of optimize for performance, optimize for memory, optimize for target platforms. Video games are the only form of media that has to go through this type of constant tinkering, constant modification to make sure it runs and meets all the target platforms that you want. But with game streaming or pixel streaming, we actually can run the game on the server side and just stream the frames of video back down to the player and capture the controller input from the player and have that affect the game running on the server, thereby making sure that the game is delivered at the same quality, same frame rate, right? All those bells and whistles in place, regardless of the type of device that you're playing on. Can be very complex, right? Or it used to be very complex. We believe that we're making it easier, right, for game developers to be able to go ahead and bring their games out in this fashion. And so we have, some folks here with us that have not only helped customers to go ahead and stand up on these and experiment with GameLift streams, but have also worked on the platform themselves, like Benjamin Meyer. So, Benjamin, maybe you can talk to us a little bit about what are the challenges that we see with game streaming or pixel streaming of games in this manner?
I think let's start with the fact that everyone does not like latency, right? So let's tackle this topic first, because I think let's be honest, pixel streaming or like game streaming is a latency sensitive workload, like online games. And here we move essentially the latency we have from the input to the client to a server side, which means the input gains the latency to the actual game client. So that is a very important change. At the same time, we reduce or can reduce the latency between the game client and the actual game server for multiplayer games drastically, because they can be in the same data center essentially. But this is one of the key changes. We move the latency added to the game from the initial latency from client to server, from actual player to the actual game client, while the latency between the game client and the game server can be negligible at that point.
So I guess
now,
then what we've done then is we've taken the many players to one server, and we've inverted that. So we have one server broadcasting out to many. So that latency between all of those changes are happening right there on the server without having to traverse the web. And then we can output that directly. So we get those performance games by having multiplayer on that server side.
Correct. And the key challenge with that is, well, what we obviously want is that the actual game clients, which will, in our case, then run inside of a data center, be as close to our players as possible, so that me from Berlin is not connected to an actual game client running in Ohio that's like 150 milliseconds just by going light speed back and forth. So ideally, my game client would then be probably in Frankfurt or maybe even in a local zone closer to us, like a local data center, to literally reduce essentially the input latency to the game client from my actual web client, which I would use in that case. Right. Here's where like modern technologies really shine, and that is something we haven't had, let's say, 10 years back, right? 10 years back, there were no data centers at every major hub in the world. So the actual latency to the running game clients were quite high compared to what we can actually do nowadays.
I have a quick question. With latency being such a challenge, what type of games do you think would be fit for something like GameLift streams?
Go ahead, Chris. I know we have spoken so much about it.
Well, certainly games that are less latency sensitive and not as precision oriented. You know, Axel was talking about being a fighting game player, right? Those can be a bit more difficult because there may be a variance in the amount of latency depending on when you pressed a button or what was going on in the network at a time. Forget putting this into a competitive environment where the network may get swamped at any moment, right? And it's a typical last mile problem, which we've had since people started connecting online through a browser, right? In the 1990s. That last mile problem is we can only control bandwidth and throughput to a certain degree. Once it's inside people's homes, people's home networks are typically messy, right? There's all these sorts of things we can't account for. So what you want to do is kind of think about which games have a little bit of forgiveness around latency. So things like real-time strategy games, real-time adventure games, action-based games, retro games, right? These sorts of things. Even in some cases, first-person shooters, depending on the type of game that you're seeking, right, to leverage the type of platform for. And it also depends on where your player is going to be playing from. So, for example, if you know that you're standing up a service that is really going to be targeted at, let's say, people that are connected to fiber network, well, great. Then you may not have those same type of considerations.
And something to add real quick also is I think if the developer isn't certain about how latency sensitive their game is, or if this might be sufficient, it's easy enough to set up that, you can just test it out real quick and see how it goes. We'll get more into, of course, setup and stuff later. But it's something that within a few minutes, you can just play with it and see what real world is.
Yeah. And I think it's a lot also like, what is your player base, right? If you build a game which is like purposely built and designed to be a competitive pixel perfect game, for example, then that might be very difficult with like moving the latency between the client and the actual player. But for example, I've played a lot of shooters in this, like first-person shooters already through our service, and it works very, very great at least for me as a casual gamer. And I think this is also where like we need to consider like what is the actual audience using such a service, because if we think about like people who play competitively, will they use a streaming service, or do they have their desktop computer with the latest GPU and the latest CPU, and would they then really use a like streaming service on this machine? Probably not. So the target audience is a very important factor here, because it has an obvious implication.
Yeah. So as somebody, since we have a competitive gamer with us today,
yes.
Axel, let me ask you a question. For your own home rig, are you on Wi-Fi or are you connected using a cable?
You have to be connected using a cable.
Right.
It's even to the point, like, and I was going to bring this up a bit about like almost community or community perception on this too, but in the same Wi-Fi kind of thing, in a lot of fighting games, for example, if you see a Wi-Fi like icon and your potential next like opponent, you just won't accept that match. It's gotten to the point where maybe back like Ben mentioned back in the day where there's a lot more like acceptance of like general latency just from like that's just the state of the industry was. It's gotten to the point in fighting games where every 1/60th of a second means something, like every frame. So even having that slight amount of like inconsistency or dropping of any manner there can really affect gameplay there. So it's you have to be on Ethernet, and latency does make things a little bit complicated there.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think that it's important to remember. I feel like we talk a lot about the democratization of game development and games in general. And like, I love video games, and I want more people to experience what it's like to play video games and to learn why like all of us here love video games. And I think that's what we're trying to do, right? Is target people who might not have high-end, top-of-the-line game PCs or the latest console, but still maybe want to try it out.
That's exactly what I was going to actually bring up. We were on the same wavelength here.
There you go.
Yeah, so a big part of like my friend groups outside of work, for example, is especially in today's more remote connected world, if you will, we do a lot of our hangouts just online, and a lot of these folks that wouldn't be considered or consider themselves traditional or typical gamers have started to dip in their toes and like joining us on Discord calls and wanting to play these games, but they don't have high-end PCs, so we have to always operate on the lowest common denominator of like, okay, well, who's playing, what games can they play, and kind of include that. And something like this with like Game of Streams can actually kind of bridge that gap where we can just have those players play on the Game of Streams instead of running on their own PC and join us on these games potentially. But as well, even just looking at these quote unquote competitive games like Street Fighter 6, they just launched on. I hate to always bring it back to Street Fighter 6. That's kind of my thing. But on Street Fighter 6, they recently launched on the Switch too. And one of the main things that people were saying is being able to bring this anywhere and maybe not play it competitively on a tournament level, but just bring it to family events and play with friends or introduce people to the game and like on the bus or anything like that. It's just been a huge boon, and it's been selling gangbusters just because of that. So even though maybe you could consider the high-end competitive side of these competitive games, maybe not too applicable there, they're like 1% of the actual market or audience targeted for these games themselves. So it opens up a whole other avenue there as well.
Yeah.
And I think,
go ahead, John.
Oh yeah. Last point is, I think just there's also a lot of skeptics out there where when they hear latency, they just go, well, we can't have latency, so this is a non-starter. But I think for those folks also, if you go and look at like a service like Amazon Luna, you can see all the games that are being successfully streamed commercially today and kind of see like, okay, there's a lot of pretty performant games out there that require responsiveness that are streaming just fine. So, we are all very detail-oriented engineers who like get into the nuts and bolts. So when we start analyzing latency, we want to optimize everything, but also, at a high level, it's being used pretty successfully, right?
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. I mean, here, and so when we're talking about Luna, how is Luna different from GameLift Stream? So Luna is the consumer-facing service that allows you to go ahead and play a variety of games on that service that are streamed down to you, right? Pixel streamed down to you, including games like Fortnite, right? So Fortnite runs on Luna. You can go ahead and fire up your Fire TV at home, go ahead and have a controller connected and start streaming and playing Fortnite right from the comfort of your home without requiring you to go ahead and patch and download and do all this other stuff, right? So there are, again, very performant, highly competitive games that run there. We don't want to give the impression that you can't do that there. Test, test, test. That is the rule of thumb before you kind of put it out there, right? So who wants to jump in and tell us a bit about what GameLift Streams is?
Yeah, I can start at a high level. It really is a matter of a lot of the streaming solutions out there are things you have to download, install, and manage yourself, whereas this is a managed service. So it's a matter of you can upload your game files to S3 and within minutes configure it to be streaming to users. So it really does just make it so much easier where you don't have to manage servers with patching and things. You don't have to manage protocols and codecs and things and figuring all that out. It's all just kind of built in and works, and provides all the standard benefits of managed services where it's scalable, highly available, resilient, all that fun stuff. So it really is a nice way for companies to start playing with streaming and see if it'll work for them and, get rolling.
Pretty awesome. So it's a managed capability, as you mentioned, that takes really away that undifferentiated heavy lifting of having to manage that kind of infrastructure. You don't know where your players are actually going to want to play from. So trying to go ahead and size that up and put your own kind of pixel streaming servers in those locations, probably not the best use of your capital or your time, right? So this allows you to go ahead and leverage this service on a global basis. And so you don't have to go ahead and worry about where your players are playing from. We can go and spin up those instances where the demand is, correct?
Exactly.
So Amazon GameLift Streams helps developers stream games at up to 1080p resolution, 60 frames a second, to any device with a WebRTC-enabled browser. And we're able to do so because it's leveraging AWS's global footprint and optimized GPU instances, right? So publishers can deploy and stream game content in minutes without having to really make any modifications to their games. And players can start gaming in seconds without having to wait for installs. So let's talk a bit about what it specifically is, talk a bit about the structure of GameLift Streams. Who wants to go ahead and jump in and talk about the tech underneath?
Yeah, I can go ahead and kind of give that brief walkthrough of the key concepts and things like that, and others can kind of jump in and dive deeper where they want. But really, there's just a few key aspects to be aware of. First, there's the application, which is defining your game. You upload the files to S3, you specify that path. Then you create the stream group, which involves choosing the stream class, which is basically your GPU level. You can choose high or ultra depending on the performance you need. And again, this is where test, see what works best for you. And then once you get that all created, you make the call to create a stream session, and that returns, amongst other data, a URL that you give to the player. And they put that in the web browser and go. So it really is, when you're trying to set it up and start playing with it, pretty straightforward in terms of just a few key things to know and configure, and you're off to the races.
So, okay, what do I have to write my game in like? Is there a particular engine that works best with this? Is there a particular operating system? Like, how do we go ahead and ensure that game developers can bring their games to this service? What do some of those requirements look like?
Maybe let me take this one. So ultimately, it depends a little bit on like the detailed configuration. So we get a little bit like one step deeper here now. So when you define an application, you define the actual runtime of it. And the runtime is, think of it like, does it run on Windows or on Linux? And in Linux, we have two flavors. One flavor is Linux. So you need to bring a Linux binary here for this. And the second flavor is Proton. And maybe, Chris, you can give us a little bit more information around Proton, because you know that probably even better than I do. But ultimately, with a Proton runtime, you can take a Windows binary and run it on top of Linux. What that means is, in a second step, you heard about a stream group. And a stream group somewhat is a placeholder for like the actual physical machines. You can think of it this way. And a stream group can be either Windows or Linux, which also means if you have a Linux-based stream group, so the machines all run a Linux operating system, you can only run Proton or Linux applications on top of that. And the opposite, obviously, like with Windows applications, you run them on a Windows-based stream group here. And using Linux brings a lot of benefits. I don't know if we want to dive into into this topic here, but one key aspect or one key challenge of streaming is that infrastructure or GPU resources are quite cost intensive, which also means adding another layer like license costs, for example, is counterproductive to a lot of business cases around use cases around pixel streaming or game streaming.
Mm-hmm.
So here is where Linux actually shines, because it's cheaper to use a Linux-based stream group, and it's also enables you to run, for example, 2 games from a single physical machine. Of course, this will only work for games which are not that resource intensive. So think of like you have a little jump and run game, then this one can use this capability, which we as of now just offer on Linux-based stream groups, where you can run 2 actual games from a single GPU, further decreasing the cost quite drastically.
Yeah. And so you're right. And so as we've been saying all along, it just depends on the type of game you have. But when we're also talking about Proton, I think one of the really cool things about this, and where you may have heard the term before, is in relation to Valve's Steam Deck. So Valve had been working on this handheld device. If you remember, actually, first they had worked on a set-top box style or small PC form factor type of device. And then they pivoted towards this handheld device. Became very, very popular. And one of the things that drove the popularity was the ability to play games from your Steam library on this device. But how they were doing it is they were using Proton. And Proton sits between your Windows game code and Linux, and actually acts as that translation layer between both of them. The success of the Steam Deck drove a lot of interest from the Proton community and from the developer community. So we see more and more developers continuing to lean in to optimize performance on top of Proton. All of that means down the line is that when you're running on Proton on our infrastructure, you get all the benefits that we've seen by that market movement by, hobbyists and game developers and the community improving performance of Proton. And as Benjamin said, by running on a Linux instance, you can decrease your costs, you can increase your performance, and you can get greater multi-tenancy depending on the type of game that you have versus just a straight Windows binary, right? So we give you the option to bring your game running on, again, Windows on the back end, or on Proton on Linux, or on straight Linux. So a good number of opportunities to go ahead and bring your games out to the market.
And just a couple of days ago, we actually also made Proton 9 available as a runtime. So right now we offer Proton 8 and Proton 9. And I hope also at some point Proton 10 when it's ready for the broader market, because right now I think Proton 9 is the release candidate.
And one other thing I was just going to add is I think a lot of the customers I've talked to basically break it down to Proton is emulation, so it adds an extra layer we need to test. But then if it is a Windows-based game, you don't have to pay for the Windows licensing. So it's pretty simple ROI in terms of if you can do the testing relatively quickly and easily, that cost savings can be huge over time.
Yeah. Yeah. And there are some other, esoteric bits about running on Windows versus on Linux versus Proton on Linux, everything from, performance of the rendering pipeline down to the GPU and out, right? And those can have a lot of variances that can change whether or not your game is actually playable in this type of environment, or it plays the way you would expect it to go ahead and play and want to go ahead and deliver to your customers. The good thing is that you can test on all of those to see which provides the best performance to go ahead and bring out to your players, right? So again, it's about optionality. People can download and play your game running it locally, or you give them the opportunity to play the game from any of the devices that we talked about, right? Any WebRTC sort of browser and device. So it gives you the ability to reach those players, and we give you a bunch of choice with regard to the operating system underneath it, right? And so come in and play. That's what we're really telling you. Come in and play and test on GameLift streams, right? And we're here to help you do so. So let's talk a bit about some of the opportunities that can be realized by having your own distribution channel, right? Not having to necessarily go ahead and have let's say, a publisher or a third party deliver your catalog of games, right? If you happen to be a game developer that has multiple titles and you want to go ahead and bring this kind of service out, So you can launch, again, those game services or different storefronts, which we know is a hot topic right now in the game space, or subscription services to expand your player base. But let's talk about some of the other opportunities that this opens up to you as a content creator, as a game developer. So Gina, one of the ones I think is super interesting is about breathing new life into back catalog of titles. Like, how would that happen?
I feel like this would actually really excite you because I feel like you're just such a fan of a lot of the older games. And I think that you might even know better than me, but with some of these older games, right, they can struggle to run on modern hardware. And so with something like GameLift streams, that's what you can use to run these games without each individual person who wants to play these games needing that specific hardware to actually run it, right? And so I think it's really great because you can kind of have access to the full history of games and kind of play whatever you want to play without needing specific things. So
see, this is why Gina and I are such good friends, right? She knew exactly where to go ahead and steer that conversation. Yes, I'm big into game preservation, of course, and the history of games. But what's really cool about this is think about a publisher or developer that has a back catalog of titles that they don't necessarily have the ability or resources to go ahead and kind of modernize or rewrite to go onto modern consoles, but they want to test whether or not there's still interest around that content. So now you can go ahead and stand up an environment where it does operate correctly, and then you can basically blast that out to any device that you want to, giving people the opportunity to taste and experience those games and see whether or not, right, there is some validity to reigniting that franchise or reigniting that property, right? So this gives developers the ability to dig back into that back catalog of content, bring it out to the audience and see if there's new or renewed demand or interest. And that could change your development course, right, for the company. So I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah. I think that there's also a couple other really interesting use cases that GameLift streams can help with. One is doing demos, right? And changing the way that you market games instead of watching a trailer or maybe downloading and installing a demo file, right? Players can just like click a link or maybe just play directly in whatever library or catalog they're looking at for exploring new games and just play the game then and there without having that extra barrier to entry to have to download something to play a demo. And playing a game is a lot different than just watching a trailer, right? And so it's a way that you can enhance the marketing and acquisition of your game as well. I think that playable ads is a different avenue too, where GameLift streams can help with. And so that's just one piece, but there's a lot of other use cases that GameLift streams can help with. I think like maybe John and Axel, I'm sure, Ben, you can probably talk to it too, but can talk about testing and QA and play testing, right?
Yeah. The QA testing in particular is one that resonates with me as someone who spent some of my college summers testing Tiger Woods golf. So, when you have to go or when it's break time, you walk over with your disc and you hand it to a manager and they sign it out or sign it in. And then you come back later, sign it back out, take it back to your machine. Like the security and operations involved in distributing this super sensitive content is a massive headache and cost. And if you can eliminate that by just passing out URLs, and again, that was also for local testers. Now that we're moving towards a remote virtual world, that gets exponentially more costly and difficult. So the security benefits alone of just keeping that code in your personal S3 bucket and letting people stream the game, it's just huge. So I think there's a lot of companies that could get huge savings from that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to kind of speak a bit on that is like it's not like yes, the security part is a huge element there and helping on like the QA side of things, but even just kind of internal play testing as well is really important too. One of my own customers that we've brought this up to and we're actually pursuing a little bit on is now that we're moving into more globally expansive and remote like work. One of the problems that this customer, who unfortunately can't disclose, but has mentioned that when they're doing their end of week play testing the game just to kind of see where things at, and also just kind of build company morale and just like togetherness there. They've actually had some struggles where some parts of the company base actually can't take part of these because they don't have a machine that can run this. Say maybe the game's running on as a Windows build, and a lot of the artists are developing on Macs, and they're not able to. It doesn't logically make sense for this more of a startup kind of world to send everybody a PC just to play the game. So in this kind of world, it helps using GameLift streams or to actually connect the company together and get everyone involved in a simple, like a nice common denominator there, rather than having to ship out hardware to everybody as well.
Yeah, and that gets really that's super important, especially when all you need is somebody that's in the point rev off of a test, and they're like, I'm not seeing this same bug, or I'm not seeing the same anomaly happen, and everybody else is like, what are you talking about? Like, we don't see that here, and nobody's checking the versioning. I mean, it can be like a .0x build of something, or being able to go ahead and then A/B test with different builds or different types of things for regional sort of engagement and distribution. So there's a lot of advantages to being able to have control over that on the back end. And one of the big ones, right, is when we start looking at pools of customers, right, or players that are testing, is we don't have to worry about code leaks and rips anymore. You don't have to worry about those games being pulled and then showing up for download somewhere, because unless somebody is breaking into your servers, they don't have access to the actual executable on the client. So where you may get, screenshots or somebody doing video capture, but you can watermark those too, right? There's all different types of things that you can do to still allow for a large kind of player pool to give you feedback and to be able to test, to work in a remote development environment globally, while being able to go ahead and make sure that everybody's on the same build. You keep in track of who has had access, be able to test different versions of that, and to protect your intellectual property. Super awesome, right? I mean, that's an amazing, amazing opportunity for developers working in global game development, delivering global games. All right, so we talked a lot about GameLift Streams, what it is, the type of games that you can deploy to this and bring out to your customer base, different use cases for this. But it's one thing to talk about a service like this. Why don't we go ahead and walk through a little demo of GameLift Streams in action? So I'm going to move us on over to a demo scene of a session where I recorded myself playing some classic Atari 50 games on GameLift Streams. Let's jump over there and check it out. All right, team. So this is the top-down version of my demo bench over here that you're viewing. And so what we see here is I'm connected using an iPhone to our GameLift Stream server and playing through some games on the Atari 50th Anniversary Collection, which is an amazing collection of games. I think right now with all the DLC, you have like 130 games in the Atari catalog across the entire continuum of their history. And one of the reasons I love using the Atari 50 collection here is because they are demanding from a Twitch perspective, right? You have to be able to have really precise controls, especially in games like Tempest 2K that you're going to see being played here. And it just worked perfectly. And it's always wonderful, right? When you're working with a team of super passionate and intelligent people building some awesome stuff for us to use, and it just works so well. It just makes you feel so good, right? So this is what we're looking at right now. Anybody have any, want to go and share their experiences of playing any games or things like this through GameLift Streams while we're watching the demo?
I think one thing to call out here is, I mean, you're on Wi-Fi here, which is also like, we know, like latency sensitivity is a thing, and Wi-Fi can be quite tricky. But from my experience, it runs really, really well, even on Wi-Fi. Of course, if you're in a super crowded area, it's going to be more challenging. But at home on Wi-Fi, it runs very, very well. And I love your setup here with like the controller attached to the phone, or the phone attached to the controller.
Yeah.
And I remember like when we were at GDC, you were running around with like this super tiny controller and showcasing on like 5G the same demo, just like gave people your phone and then this tiny controller like play. And it was a really, really great experience, actually.
And
I love that.
And I love surprising people with this stuff. So what Benjamin is referring to, 8-Bit Dome makes this, I mean, the controller is literally 2 inches long by 1 inch tall.
Yes.
And I would just have it in my pocket, and we would sit in meetings, or we'd be out at a restaurant somewhere, and I would fire up this game, turn on the control, and just toss it onto the table. And people are like, what's this? And when they'd start playing, they're like, how is this working? And when we would explain how it works, why it works, the ability to keep that performance so high, just blown away by it. Like, it was the most powerful demo of the tech, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, really cool. And as I mentioned before, games like Tempest 2K, which I'm playing right here, really requires precise controls to be able to go ahead and play it effectively. And I found that it was perfectly playable and a wonderful experience just playing it on streams. It was great.
And actually, last year at GDC, I worked the booth where we were demoing Amazon Luna. And again, similar technology. And we actually unplugged the Ethernet cables for a bit and tested using conference Wi-Fi and didn't have any issues. We didn't want to run that way all day because, again, conference Wi-Fi, you never know. But we were curious, and I was shocked at how smoothly, like, we were playing some racing games, high res, and it ran great.
We did the same thing at Unreal Fest a couple of years ago, where we had Fortnite running on Amazon Luna up to try to draw people into our booth. But we were actually playing the Only Up game, which is in UEFN, a really popular game mode that someone made, where you have to jump on different things, parkour. It's really fun, and it worked great.
Yeah,
so.
no, and it's wonderful when we get to see that stuff happen, right? And of course, if you're doing a demo like that, you try it first, make sure it works, make sure that everything is up and running. The good thing is that the more times we go to run it, the more confident everyone was. It just works, right? And so we knew the infrastructure, the ability to go and get as close to the player as possible, having these awesome games on there, just really made the service just operate as powerful, demo. And not just a demo. I mean, there are companies that launched their own services and are utilizing this today. So this is the demo of GameLift Streams in action, actually going and running. Let's go ahead and jump back over to our panel page, and let's talk about some of the customers that are currently using GameLift Streams. All right, so that was the demo of GameLift Streams in action. Let's talk about who is using GameLift Streams today. And we talk a bit about some of our customers or partners that are exploring the opportunities that GameLift Streams provides.
Yeah, I could probably hop in and give an example from my own customer base as well. A little, small company out there that maybe some folks may have heard of, little Jackbox Games, has been actually looking into running this.
And I will tell you,
small studio.
And I will tell you, for the more than 25 years that I've been in the games industry, my very first corporate meeting was with the former Jellyvision creators of You Don't Know Jack, which then became Jackbox Games. So near and dear to my heart, buddy.
100%. Yeah. And obviously that's a joke. Like, everyone knows Jack. Well, even speaking to people that don't consider themselves, traditional gamers, if you will, they run Jackbox Games, especially in today's day and age, being all remotely connected.
Mm-hmm.
It's not uncommon for folks to say, hey, we have some time on the weekend, or what are we going to do? Just grab some drinks and play some Jackbox together, like boot up Quiplash or anything like that. But what's interesting about this is that even with those environments, you still traditionally, or in the past, you have still needed to have, downloaded the game, have it like a laptop, at least one person running on a laptop and connect, or on a PC or whatnot. So it's flexible enough for that kind of case. But what Jackbox has been looking to do is actually have this push it even further. So say maybe you're at a house party with some friends, and on a whim, someone's like, "Hey, let's play some Quiplash or anything," and instead of having to go grab a laptop and connect it to your TV or anything like that, why don't you just stream it directly to the TV there? Or even then have it being hosted out in public, maybe at like conference or anything like that too, as well, and have it being hosted straight from one player's phone, and everyone else playing for their own phones as well. So Jackbox been trying to look and break into this streaming side of things as well, and they decided to actually partner with GameLift Streams to do so, which kind of been leading to them being able to move an user or have their catalog being available to a vast variety of people, vast variety of devices, as well as just anecdotally from saying is now developing and even testing this in the future is much more easier because instead of having to develop on each individual, different platform being like PC, mobile, or like, now smart TVs and whatnot, they can just build one build being streamed out through GameLift streams and not have to worry about the specific hardware requirements needed on each individual device there. So it's been a really good partnership. They've been really happy with it, and we've been just kind of moving forward with that.
Yeah, Speaking as someone who has been standing there awkwardly setting up a machine while party attendees stand around awkwardly looking on, I really appreciate that they're headed down that path.
Yeah. And what I was about to say, this is all about reducing friction. Consumers, players have more distractions than at any other point in our lives. We're walking around basically with supercomputers in our hands, being able to access every form of media or content that we could possibly want. So when you have to sit there and say, let me go find the game, let me put it in, let me get this staged, let me get it stood up, when we can change the engagement from that to click and off you go, we remove the friction, we get more people in playing, we let people be able to taste those games, play those games, have more moments of spontaneity around those games because they don't have to set them up. It's been set up for them on Amazon GameLift streams. Pretty amazing.
And I think maybe to really hit the nail here, like reducing friction. Ludio, one of our customers using this service, is doing exactly that. They they do revolutionize the advertising space for the games industry. So what they have built is essentially an advertisement version of a game. Think of, you click a button of a Hitman campaign and you are in the game within a second. You play for a minute, you get a challenge essentially where you, for example, have to assassinate someone. You have exactly 1 minute. And after that, you get asked, hey, did you like the game? Yes or no? And based on that, you get sent to the store to buy the game. It's the real game. It's not a slimmed down browser kind of version of it. Yeah. It's really the actual game. And you're in the game within like a second. It's a really different way of testing or seeing or getting looped into a new game. I really, really like what they have built. And I'm really looking forward to where they will heading.
Yeah, and I'm on their site right now, and they have games like Redacted, Deadlink, RoboCop Rogue City, Hitman World of Assassination, RoboCop Unfinished Business. Like, these are all Ludios. Ludios that you could go in and jump in and play. You might think audio, video, Ludio. That you could just go in and jump in and be able to taste those games and play them. And it works unbelievably well. Like, it's amazing, right? So definitely go and check it out. Of course, we're going to have links to all of this in the show notes underneath. So those are a couple of the partners. And of course, we'll have a link to where you can go ahead and discover other companies and partners that are currently working and utilizing GameLift streams. Now, I know that John is going to be leaving us here shortly. So before John gets out of here, and then we can go ahead and talk about him while he's gone. John, are there any other piece of parting information that you want to go ahead and share with our audience? Tell us, John, what's on your mind, buddy?
I think the only thing is just a quick follow-up on that last use case. That's super cool because I've heard of developers who build on Roblox and UEFN doing small bite-sized tests of certain types of functionality, but it's really tough for just standalone developers who aren't using those platforms. So using a technology like this to find a way to run those tests, that unlocks so many possibilities for validating how people will react to certain aspects of a game before you have to release this, huge multi-year do or die kind of application.
It's kind of like, and I kind of piggyback a little bit off of that because I love this direction taken of like removing friction. As speaking to some of our customers, that's actually one of the things that we were hearing a lot of, like a use case for this in particular, is even the play testing or like beta testing, out to the public like environment is it's kind of easy to get folks excited to, hey, I'm going to sign up and I want to take part of this. But it's getting them to actually download the game, go through their email and everything, and actually set it up and then play and provide feedback. that's where you're seeing a lot of like friction there, or like just people being blocked there essentially. So with gaming streams, like now being able to just basically provide them a link and say, hey, you signed up, here you go and play it and give your feedback directly there as needed. That's been a godsend, really, and we've seeing a lot of like customers getting excited for that. And we may even have a bit of a solution in the works being worked on by some of our folks here, myself included, in some other essays that might be able to touch a little bit on that. But stay tuned for that.
You all heard that here first. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and let John take off and go ahead and spend time with more of our customers. John, thank you so much for joining us on the podcast today.
I'm good for another half hour, actually. So.
Oh, you are?
2 p.m. hard stop.
Oh, okay. Well, there you go. So this is what, all right. So now what John is going to do is a deep dive deconstruction of the entire stack.
Oh God, actually I have to
go. Okay, well now we are actually coming to the last section of the podcast here, which is talking a bit about kind of the tips and best practices. Okay, so we've talked about what about the current market environment, the environment that pixel streaming or game streaming kind of lives in, where it kind of grew up from, and what the current state of that looks like today. We talked about the service itself, showed a demonstration of it running, talked about some of the customers that are currently using this, talked a little bit about the architecture as well. But now let's talk about the practical side of this.
All right, and I'm going to take it. Everyone was like leaning back here. So the pricing model is fairly simple. You get billed similar to like any other service in AWS for what you consume, for what you use. In GameLift streams terms, we have 2 ways for you to consume the streams. And you heard about the stream group earlier. So the stream group is, like I said, the placeholder for capacity, and it can have 2 different versions of capacity. One of them is, we call it always on, which means you set this to 5, you have 5 machines running all the time, so you get billed for these 5 machines running all the time. The benefit of this is, because they are running, starting the stream session on top of them is extremely quick. We're speaking about 6 seconds from someone clicks a button to you actually have a picture coming to your browser. The downside of this is you manage or have to manage your capacity here so that you don't have like 10 capacity for the rest of the day and they are completely unused. So that's a little bit on you, but you gain a lot of benefits in terms of like how fast can you actually get into a stream session. Then the second thing is on-demand capacity. And as the name suggests, this is really when you click the button, the machine starts and you get thrown into the game the moment the machine is up and running, ready for consuming or like rendering a new stream. Here, the upside of it is you don't pay anything except the stream is actually running. The downside of it is, well, you have to wait for the machine to come up, right? Which can be, especially on Windows machines, a little bit higher because Windows is a little bit slower than Linux in terms of booting up. You can combine these 2 things. So imagine you have 5 always on. When these 5 are used, you start on-demand capacity on top of that. So there's like a mix of things. And as everything in AWS is an API, capacity for us is also managed through an API. So when you see a change in demand, you can adjust both always on and on-demand capacity as you like and as you need. And now to give it a little bit or add a little bit more complexity to it, you can also do this across regions. So if you manage streams, one of the key challenges nowadays is, well, streaming from a single region is easy. You set up your streaming and signaling service there. And then you need a matchmaker, and then you have a streaming setup. But now imagine you are a larger studio or you're Jackbox Games with customers across the whole globe. You suddenly probably want to stream from at least 6, 7 regions across the globe. So you have to set up all of this in all regions. With our service, we take away this heavy lifting. You have one region where you manage the capacities and the applications, and also the capacities for other regions, which means one central place for managing all this complex technology through an API, including the capacities for this across all regions where the service is available, or better say, where you want this service for you to have capacity available.
So incredibly flexible. So you can have a mix of instances that are always on, ready to go and jump in at a moment's notice, some on demand that can spin up based on traffic, based on demand, based on an event that was kind of broadcast out to everybody. And now people are starting to come in. So you can kind of monitor that where, as you mentioned, if you had 5 always on instances, if all of a sudden they quickly became saturated, then you know that there may be a player spike going on or something like that. So you can spin up more always on and go ahead and kind of have those warmed to start easing more and more players in. But when those players stop playing, you can wind those down and you're only paying for the amount of time that players were playing the game. You're not paying for that, all of that infrastructure to always be on all of the time, right?
Exactly. So this is the flexibility and the scalability we offer to our customers with this.
Yeah. And
That's the power of the cloud, right?
Yes. Exactly what we talked about before, which is, one of the things that we saw early on, right? We're talking years ago with these type of services, when companies would have to stand up their own infrastructure to do it. If you got the regions wrong, if you assumed that you were going to have more players in one location than the other, you just can't box up racks of servers and move them to a different data center, right? And so that's what we saw a lot of this, it's very expensive to go ahead and get stood up. Are you meeting that right demand? How do you handle, events that cause a massive amount of traffic coming to the infrastructure? Running on top of AWS means that you don't have to worry about that. We got you covered in that regard. Absolutely.
And when we speak about pricing, we heard earlier a bit that we have different runtimes, right? We have Linux, we have Proton, and we have Windows, which also means we say our golden path is Windows, which means a Windows stream group with a Windows application. So this should always work, right? Especially for game studios, primarily usually targeting Windows, the Windows operating system. So here, that's like why we call it kind of like the golden path. This should always work. But what I encourage our customers to do all the time is, look, Windows will work. Let's be honest. But I would always encourage everyone try Proton, because for a lot of games, even very modern new games built with very latest Unreal engines, it happens that customers throw this into a Proton runtime and it just works without any surprises, right?
Well, the surprise is that it just works.
Yeah, exactly. But ultimately, in the end of the day, like with using Proton, they cut a lot of the costs. Right. In the end of the day, they still have to test the game thoroughly. I would always advise that. But as a cost optimization strategy, before like really starting to look into building Linux binaries, this is a very fast test. It takes a couple of minutes to really just put it into a Proton runtime and put it on a Linux stream group. So that this is like, for me, I would call it a no-brainer to just test. And if it works, then maybe continue proceeding and testing it further. Yeah. And see if that is actually for your use case good. Because let's say for an internal use case where you have 5 testers, paying the extra fee for Windows might not be an issue. But for business to consumer streaming like Jackbox, where you have thousands of users, that sure will like very quickly add up to like a lot of costs.
Yeah. All right. So a ton of information and a demo of Amazon GameLift streams. Before we go ahead and get out of here for the day and let you get on with the rest of your day, why don't we hear from our expert panel? Any words of advice or things they would like to see? Like, let's start with Gina. Gina, what words of advice or thoughts, parting thoughts do you have for our audience today?
I was hoping I could go first so no one steals mine, because I was just going to say that my advice is just play with it, test it out, get your hands dirty, because that, in my experience, is the best way to learn. So better than reading documentation.
Agreed. Yeah. Agreed. That's a good one. All right, who's going to follow that?
I can go. Go for it. Oh, sure. I was just going to say, just kind of like, consider, it's not just the end like product of like game streaming to like your end users there. consider also just kind of how this can impact like even just productivity internally with like playtesting and Q&A and whatnot. There's a lot of different approaches we can take here. And there's the GameLift streams can incorporate in so many different use cases here. So I really do kind of piggybacking off of what Gina said, just play around with it. And as you upload a game and actually see it in action, personally, when I did that, that's where you start seeing the gears turning. Like, oh, where can we incorporate this? So I really do encourage to just explore not just end user streaming, but just like how we can use it to speed up your own development as well.
Yeah, I love that too. Right, how it can create a positive impact in terms of cost management and de-risking, working in a global development environment, a global testing environment, right? So it's not just about the consumers on the front side where you see those cost savings and optimization, right? On the developer side is too. Excellent point too, Axel. All right,
and,
John?
Yeah, I can go give Ben the last word. And I think it's really just a +1 to both of those other two. I was going to go with just go play with it because it really is that easy to just go set up and test. Gina took it, so +1 there. And then again, like Axel mentioned, it's something that initially you might be like, we don't want to stream our game as like the primary delivery mechanism, but there's so many ways you can use this that I think it's a matter of sit, let it marinate for a bit, kind of play with some ideas. There's a lot of ways you can use streaming outside of your primary delivery mechanism that can still add a ton of value. So really just kind of think about various aspects of how you're running the game, delivering the game, and all that fun stuff.
Yeah, great point. Benjamin.
So I'm not going to piggyback onto this, but I'm going to piggyback a tiny tad. Technology has evolved a lot in the last 10, 15 years, especially when it comes down to like signaling servers, like processing from input events, encoding, decoding capabilities with proto-buffers. So a lot of new technologies came to the market, which also changed how this technology feels. So don't let the bias which is out there about stream technology stop you from actually testing this technology, because one thing I've seen a lot is the typical bias of like game streaming is not good because it's streamed. But the technology evolved so much between yesterday and today that this should not stop our customers, or you in particular, from actually testing this technology.
Yeah, completely agreed. My advice would be, look, the number of people playing video games, the most that it's ever been, it's only going to continue to grow. And people are experiencing content from so many different devices. It used to be a whole lot easier 15 years ago to say, this is where people play, and this is where people consume, television, and this is where people are listening to music. And now we're doing all of those things everywhere, all of the time. So a platform like Amazon GameLift Streams gives you the ability to reach those players from wherever they happen to be, and to ignite interest in your game, to reignite love that they had for a particular franchise that they completely forgot about. But now there's such a low barrier to entry in terms of friction. Click that link and just start playing, that there's an audience waiting to play your games. We know discoverability right now is one of the biggest problems that we see in the games industry. And it's a problem of success because so many people want to play and so many more people are developing games that we have a massive amount of content out there. So now how do we remove that friction of starting those games up and discovering games that we want to go ahead and play? GameLift Streams is the perfect platform upon which to go ahead and bring that type of a service, right? Unencumbered, unimpeded to a massive audience. And so, yes, play around with that technology. Don't make assumptions about what came before. Go ahead and test in these things. And hey, put it on Proton, see if it runs, and you may be pleasantly surprised. So those are my tips or thoughts as we go ahead and wrap up this episode of Boss Level. I want to thank my panel of experts, Gina, Axel, Benjamin, and John, for joining us today. And of course, we're going to have links to a variety of resources to go ahead and get you started, including our latest blog, the GitHub repo, the landing page for this, and a whole other variety of links that you can go in and click in the show notes below. But once again, this takes to the end of this episode of Boss Level. Thank you so much for spending your time with us today, and we'll see you on the next episode. Thanks, gang.